welcome back. Hope you're having a great time doing something fun and creative on your end. We're here on episode 4 of this Ghostbusters villain redesign for Ghash from the episode Slimer Comes Home. And if you've seen some of the episodes before this one, hope you're enjoying it so far. I'm excited to jump back into this. I feel like we're at a really good stage where we can start to have some fun with extra details. We're going to finalize our lighting ideas as well. I've started a little bit of that rim light, and I really want to get the rest of that in here. Maybe render out some more of the glow coming from the stomach. And yeah, just have fun with it, right? Just see what we can kind of inject into this to really up that level of detail and level of immersion. I've got a good little set of reference images here, different kind of skin textures and lighting ideas and stuff. So I think we're pretty well equipped to get this handled. So my goal is going to be to try to finish this in this episode. We'll see how that goes. But I feel like that would be a good goal to try and hit, because it would represent 8 hours on this piece, which I feel like is really good for character design. You know, basically like one working day to realize a character. So let's try and hit that. Again, good luck with anything you're painting over there on your end, and remember to save often. Let's get started. So first things first, I was looking at this, opening it up, and thinking, you know, with this rim light we've got going on, we probably would benefit from pulling the value of the background down a little bit, at least at the top there where that rim light's going to be really strong. So that way we create a little bit better value contrast, a little bit better counter change. So let's go ahead and enable a gradient here, pull that background down so you can see how now our rim light's going to really have a bit more impact with that choice. And of course, switching to grayscale on our image will help us see that. When we do that, though, we also have to just be cautious about if we lose the character's silhouette too much on areas where there isn't a rim light. So there's a bit of a balancing act going on there. Also, there's this idea that maybe we would want to use the same lighting and background for other villain redesigns we might be doing next in a kind of a group shot. And I don't want to create a situation where it's really difficult for us to manage that for characters that might have different local values. It's hard to make it perfect for everything. We could go a little bit more intense with this dark background. We could go even darker with it. We could do something like that is a possibility. But I'd like to try and make this work maybe with something in that kind of range there. We could change our mind later, but I think that might be a good starting point. All right, so let's jump in. I'm going to continue this rim light now. And I think hopefully the mic is sounding all right in terms of volume here. Okay, I've got a layer for this rim light going on, and also we're going to want to probably play with some subsurface scattering on the skin where we've got a lot of light hitting. That'll be really cool. We did this rim light last time very, very quickly, just to kind of preview what we were going to do this time. I'd like to be a little more careful about implementing it now that we're committed to it and officially tackling it. Actually don't want it on that front edge. And let's actually play with the idea that the light is at such an angle where the hat blocks it from going past a certain point. It's good to try and think about that rim light as having a physical location in your scene, so that way you can imagine how it's hitting all these forms from from various places. So you can see how this rim light edge is a different thickness, and because of the way that we're changing the thickness of the rim light, it helps us feel the physical place of that rim light and also helps us understand more about the form. So we don't want to miss out on that opportunity, right? Like that's a cool thing we can take advantage of by having an additional light in the scene. And it can be very helpful for lighting up areas where maybe the form gets a little lost because it's not getting a lot of light from the other lights in the scene. And you sort of want to think about it like you're a photographer or a cinematographer, right? Where you're imagining setting up lights on your actors and designing your lighting. You know, like good photographers really just spend an eternity trying to get good at lighting, and they have all sorts of equipment and stuff to try and control that, because light is everything when it comes to photography. Well, composition as well, but you know, light is huge. So this is kind of interesting. Like the collar might block the light, the rim light. So maybe we can have a kind of a hard cut off, like right there. Now, this shoulder here is obviously going to get hit, and we could even maybe use our let's see if I duplicate this. Okay, cool. That gives me a nice utility layer to work with in case I want to stay within the bounds of this character. So we're losing a little bit there, aren't we? Let's see. I guess we lost a little bit. Okay. Let's go forward with that selection. So to create that selection, it's essentially an outline for my character. I just took all of my flat colors. They're all in a layer group, duplicated that group, and just flattened the group down and blacked it out, and then it's basically a nice little mask for the whole character. So it's kind of nice about having a set of flats for your character so that they can act like sort of like utility layers to help you paint within those regions. So I want to sort of play around with how much are we seeing of this light over here. When I was first sort of learning how to paint and stuff, I liked seeing rim lights. I always loved the way that they look, but they can be a little scary because they're bright. And if the rest of your scene isn't set up to be conducive to the rim lighting, it can kind of fall short. And so a lot of times I would be doing rim lighting and I would be afraid to pull the rim lighting in more on the form. It would be very much like kind of hiding as just an edge. And I think that that's, again, kind of like an amateur mistake, is to be afraid to do more with that rear lighting to have it hit more things. Hey Patrick, how's it going? So yeah, try to I mean, like if you've ever used 3D to help you set up lighting on something, you'll know that you can get some great effects by having those lights maybe hit more of the form. And in 3D you have that confidence, right? Because you're not having to guess how it's going to look. It's doing it for you. So try and almost think about it like you have the confidence that a 3D render would give you when you're doing this. So I'm looking up at my OBS viewport to just see a smaller version of this to see, do I like that? Do I want to go even more daring with it? I think we want to just maybe bring a little bit more rim light onto this shoulder. Okay, cool. Oh, thanks, dude. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think we're moving right along with this, and I think things are going really good. I'm definitely happy with the progress we've been able to make so far. And congrats as well. By the way, I saw that you had finished up your coursework at the school. That's really cool to see. Hopefully, be moving on to some other cool projects in the near future. Let's see if we can get this guy's head popped out a little bit using this rim light. That might be nice, right? Because he kind of gets lost in this little pocket of the image here. And I guess I sort of painted over his horn there by accident. Let's make sure we don't do that. And obviously you're trying to go for accuracy with the lighting and everything, but you know, the illustrator's mindset is to not always feel shackled to reality. You know, you can break the rules a little bit to direct the viewer to uh, highlight, to make forms more or less obvious. Like there could be various reasons why you might sort of bend the rules a little bit. You know, it's there's always like a pros and cons list, and sometimes the pros for breaking the rules outweigh the cons. And I find that most often happens with sort of like light direction, where, you know, in reality maybe the light would kind of hit a form in an unflattering way, and we can just bend the light ever so slightly, maybe a little unrealistically, to just better serve the illustration, our goals with the image. And that can be fine, again, if you kind of weigh the pros and cons and you are doing it, you know, intentionally, right? You like, that's key. But you can't weigh the pros and cons if you're not being intentional about it, obviously. So just, you know, as a sort of live example of that, as I'm painting the rim light on this goblin head here, you know, like I'm trying to be faithful to what we've done with the rim lighting everywhere else, but I'm also trying to make sure we read this form. And so, you know, maybe the rim light wouldn't quite hit all these forms this strongly, or maybe, you know, some of these would get highlighted in kind of an awkward way. But as illustrators, we can be a little bit idealized about it, and as long as you don't feel like you're breaking audience immersion with inaccuracy, then it could be worth it, right? It could be worth it to kind of feel like you have that freedom. Your audience is not going to be able to sort of like math out correct lighting. They're going to react to what feels right, but they're not going to be able to, like, you know, like run some crazy like ray tracing algorithms in their brain and be able to tell you, oh, well, that right there wouldn't be that bright, right? It's like there's a little bit of a range there, and so we want to feel like we can kind of play in that range. Yeah, if it looks badass and cool, you can leave the realistic side out of it. Yeah, you're just kind of weighing, is it worth it, right? Like to bend the rule for the sake of something else, right? Like maybe we lose a little bit of immersion, but we gain readability, or we improve the composition, we improve the storytelling, right? Like those are things to always be kind of weighing. But as with always with the breaking of the rules in art, you sort of have to know the rules first to break them, and all that sort of jazz. So like here, it's like, yeah, I don't know if this arm here would really catch that rim light, but boy, it really helps the read of that arm, right? Like it's probably worth it to just bend the rules a little bit to have a little bit hitting there. You know, who's to say that the light doesn't just come right through here over that arm and boom, just hits that a little bit, right? I think that that's reasonable. Again, if we had this scene set up in Blender or something, you know, we would know if it was really going to hit it or not. But our audience is not going to set this up in Blender and check us on it. All right, let's see. I want to kind of see if I can get a little bit more diversity in the edge of this rim light here. Can we get a little bit more here? Probably can. Yep, yep. And then I suppose the back of his little spirit ghost body will get hit with some rim light as well. You know, and maybe this is supposed to feel like ethereal and glowing and whatnot, but try to go one light at a time in your brain, right? Like we're addressing the rim light from the back right now. We're not addressing the other things. So don't get scatterbrained about it. Don't lose sight of what you're trying to explain. And then when you get to the rim light, or when you get to the glow later, like address that as another source of light, because light is additive and shadows are multiplicative, right? So it is an equation. So sort of layer it and treat it that way. You don't have to like pre-compute everything. I don't, my brain doesn't like trying to do that anyway. So all right, this tongue here, I think, you know, maybe also wants to get hit. Certainly this edge wants to get hit with that light. And I think, just speaking again to things that I see students struggle with, is just not realizing the complexity of what they're trying to represent and how their process is asking them to be much better than they are at something. It's like, just make it easier for yourself. Is it? Oh, okay. So this is where I have to question, how much do I want to show? Because I don't think we're going to have rim light hitting all the way in there, but we could do that because the tongue does seem like it's poking out. So we could say something like, well, because it's sticking out further, it's sort of protruding beyond the body and starts to get hit by the light, and it would make the tongue feel like it was sticking out further by doing that. So because it's on its own layer and we're working in such a forgiving medium here in Photoshop, we can just try it and we can just see what happens. It's worth it to do experiments like this and see if we like that or not. We can go in grayscale and see, is that feeling good? Is it not? Like, I don't mind that. If we're worried that we're having trouble seeing whether it would work or not, we can flip the image as well, flip it horizontally, just to see, is it making sense or not. Flipping is not just good for assessing like things like linear perspective, right, or symmetry in design. It can also be helpful to see the lighting in a different way. And I'm not minding that. I'm actually thinking that might be okay, and I think we may even want to get a little bit of this belt here. I don't know, maybe a little bit of that edge gets caught. One thing we're going to have to address is this situation here between this hand and the body. Like that's going to need to have probably some shadow to help that work. In fact, it probably wanted to have that done already earlier, but we'll get to that. No worries. I I am questioning that choice, but I think there may be a reason to just have a little bit hitting that stomach there. Yeah, I think that's curving a little too much, but yeah, we'll leave a little hint of the rim lighting there. And maybe we can pull a little bit of the rim light underneath the tongue on this cloak here as another way to highlight the tongue sticking out. So this is the other thing that's helpful to do, is to think about everything in two different ways, right? Like, instead of making something lighter, we can instead make everything else around it darker. And that's a really helpful way to think about a lot of things in art. Like that works well with color temperature too, right? Okay, I get a little hit on this end of this belt here. And then I kind of want the light to dissipate as it comes down further. We'll just indicate a little bit, because our goal is to get everybody kind of up here in the image. I sort of want this to be the main area you're looking. You kind of come down over here, and then you sort of come through the body. So we get a little bit of a nice flow going on. So if we can draw our attention up here first, that is going to work really nicely. And speaking about having a sort of layered process like this, you can sometimes have thoughts that you want to add or tweak something about the image, and then the layers feel like they're restricting that change. Write it down. Don't forget about it. Like, one of the things I'm thinking is that, yeah, maybe I actually want to show this second collar maybe just sticking out a little bit over here. That might be interesting. And if I were to do it now, it's like, well, I'd have to kind of like block in some shadow, fill in a local color, bring in the rim light. It's like, yeah, it's such a simple element. It's probably better to just do later when we just collapse it down and we're working on a flatter version of this. And there's a lot of things that I save for that stage of the image, the sort of alla prima stage, right, where it's just that we're not really dealing with the layers. And one of the things you can do much more easily in that stage is lost edges, right? That's something hard to do when you've got things so separated in pieces. Let's see. You tried out the grayscale method again. It worked quite well. Might do it more often again. Nice, dude. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad you gave it a shot, and that you're feeling like it could potentially be worth bringing into your workflow again. I think there's a lot to be learned by doing straight color like you were doing. Like, there's no reasons to abandon that, but a lot of times you can have the grayscale, at least the mentality of grayscale, be part of your workflow, despite there being variances between how you might work one time or another. Okay, so the rim light's in there, and we could do things, for example, like we could tint the rim light. So let's just play around with that for a moment. I go here, colorize, saturate, right? We could give it like a little bit of a warm glow. It's kind of cool and interesting. We could make the rim light more intense, but I don't think I want to do that. I think I like sort of where we're at with that value overall. We could give it a little bit of an outer glow to give it some bloom. That can sometimes be interesting. Let's just try that again. These are easy things too. Whoa, not that kind of glow. Whoa, crazy, dude. Now I just want a little hint. Right, just gives it a little bit of that sort of like radiance. And that can be nice, right? Especially if you were to take something like a warm light such as this and then complement it with a slightly cooler light from another direction. I mean, those are just like Oh, it was always feel really satisfying. So we may play around with some of the specular highlights on the top forms here, getting a slight bluish tint to them. And then when it's a flattened version, we can kind of lean into some of those temperature choices. But I want to take a moment now to sort of finesse the shadows a bit more. I think we have a good base, but now we can sort of get in there and detail things a bit. Certainly, the face is a great place for us to just add a bunch of crazy details and whatnot. So yeah, let's see what we can do here. And if you remember when we first started painting these shadows, we were painting it without local values, local colors. We weren't painting with textures, and we were able to get a lot of the forms realized. We were able to get ourselves a good starting point. But with everything in place here now, there's a certain amount of clarity now that we have on just how everything is interacting, and it lets us get in here and be potentially a little bit more bold about some of these choices, a little more adventurous. And play around with just some gnarly fun details. Now I'm also like a big fan of digital sculpting and doing ZBrush stuff. You guys probably heard me talk about that on the channel before, and so when I'm in this stage, I'm thinking almost like I'm in ZBrush and I'm sculpting all these cool deformations. Like maybe it's like the neck fat here is got more like divisions on it. Maybe there's like a big weird round sort of mound of flesh here. Right, like this is something where you could always do this in the first pass of shadow, but it's really fun to do it when you've got all of this other stuff happening. Right, it's almost like we're rendering. We are rendering in 3D because it just feels much more dimensional. And I do like to spend more time on the face or whatever the focal point is, because it basically, if you elevate the focal point, you elevate the entire image. So it's like time always well spent. One way to test this is if you're doing like a human design. As hard as you might try to make it look really, really good, rendering the face, looking at references, right? Just try. It doesn't work with every style, but if you're going for more of a realistic look, try for a moment to just take like a photo of a person and just paste it in your painting on top of the face you have, and just see how much better the image feels. It can be a little bit rough, especially if you're not great at doing faces, right? But it just hopefully will be like an immediate sign, like, boy, I just need to spend more time on this face, and look how much better this whole image is going to feel. So again, a little bit of like a brutal check, but yeah, it can just signal immediately to you the value in doing that. And I'm working on these shadows first before we do any specular reflections, because the reflections are going to want to be sort of guided by some of these little like details we're adding. It's cooler than the original version. Hope they see this and get you to redesign them for a new movie. Oh, thanks, man. That would be mind blowing if something like that ever happened. But I'm glad you're digging the design. I really like kind of working with like classic IPs or like kind of like retro stuff, and then seeing how it can be updated to still feel somewhat faithful, but then maybe bringing it into more of like a modern aesthetic. So maybe we go like I've got some images of some pigs over here. Just looking at them for inspiration for like different sorts of wrinkles and folds and whatnot. You can see how we're just kind of adding another layer of grotesque detail. And this guy, I think that's the thing with this guy, right? Is he's just kind of gross. He's just kind of a creepy, gross dude that eats ghosts. So you might as well just kind of lean into that. Um, within reason, within the limits of what YouTube will allow me to do. And sometimes artists have a want to do some really extreme stuff, and then they sort of have to like retreat off to Patreon or whatever. And I get that, but it'd be kind of nice if, I don't know, maybe there was like even another like maturity or age category for a YouTube channel where you could go a little more extreme with some of that stuff. But I don't like to rely on those extremes to make a design successful. It's not a slam against people that do that stuff at all. In fact, I have done some of that stuff, but it's more just like a fun challenge, I guess, for me to get in here and just try to make it work. It's a fun challenge with just designing for media in general, is making it work for the intended audience. So if you're doing a game and the game is like, oh, it's rated, T for teen or whatever, it's like, okay, well, what do we do within that restriction, right? How do we make it great given those sort of limitations? You're never going to work on I shouldn't say never, but you're very unlikely to work on a professional project where there are no limitations imposed, right? Like it's going to be either a time constraint or a budget constraint or, whatever. And so when you see artists doing great work as part of a bigger production, it gets extra props, right? Because it's like, man, they did this and they did it under like the constraints of the project, whatever they were. You likely will never know, but that artist knows. They know all too well the limitations they had. Let's see. Do I have a good skin mask here? I do. Sweet. Because I want to be able to do some nice sweeping strokes here for this like sort of weird, gross, fatty chest area. Do I want to do, maybe I want to bring in a little bit of information here. You kind of want to, if you want to make something feel detailed, then you kind of want to just look for where are there like empty areas, where are you missing value information, and you just want to put a hint of value information there, right? So like, even though this is very, very subtle, it is still some indication of form, and so your eye is able to latch onto that and understand it as being 3D. Your eyes are really perceptive to value change, right? You have way more rods than cones in your eye, which is why you always want to prioritize values reading over colors, and know that you don't have to knock people over the head with value change for them to be able to see that. And as I get in here, I sort of like maybe see forms happening and try to react to them. So there's a little bit of experimentation here as well. I might add something and then remove it. Or I might chase it down the rabbit hole further. Go all out. Yeah. I think we're doing a pretty decent job with the grotesque factor here. All right, I got a little bit of detail in here. The other thing that's going to be fun is with all these extra folds and wrinkles and stuff, we'll have a great time with some of the subtle little reflections and stuff that we can add. Is it possible that we want to get a little more shadow on that chin section? Does he have a little bit of like a butt chin? Okay. He has like a couple little gross little like lumps on his chest there. Oh boy. You would have told me I was going to be painting like a weird snake mouth on a pig ghost creature on YouTube live last year or any time before that, I would have said you're crazy. So this, you can see there's like a hard edge here. This is from the key shadow. We have that on a separate layer. So sometimes I just miss blending some of these. It's funny how it still works fine, but you just come in here and just dither that edge where you see there's a form shadow happening, or if you need to kind of tweak the shadow's edge, I can just kind of like push that shadow to where it needs to be. Or maybe we even noticed that like, yeah, there's some shadow missing where it should have been. You can add that too. Maybe it wants to climb up a little higher. Actually, that shadow, oh, it's because there we go. I had my mask selection still going, just hidden, and it was not allowing me to do anything inside that tooth area. So you can see if I turn off the ambient shadows, you can see those key shadows in here. Very subtle. We went with a pretty subtle light on that top side. So the details, you want to have kind of like cascading details, so that way the image doesn't start to feel too busy. So I'm going to try to not like go crazy with detail here, right? This is kind of a nice little visual resting spot, but then as you go into the center of the mouth, it's like you know, kind of like leads your eye to the treasure of detail. And there's probably some like local texture stuff we can do in this mouth as well that'll be fun. Kind of thinking about it like if we were doing a 3D creature here, there'd definitely be time spent, a lot of time on the texturing phase. So I guess this is like a weird fold, overlapping fold there. You can probably lean into the shadow a little more on that pocket. Zoom out, check things. That glow was a little sloppy down here. Let's fix that up a bit. Actually, maybe we don't get much glow down there at all. Could be primarily coming from this top area. Let's try and add a little more texture to this tongue here. So I've got a layer for that. And I don't know, we'll go with those freckle brushes that I think tend to work pretty well. Let's see, I got another one here. It's a little different. Oh, what is this? Got some weird discoloration going on. That's pretty gnarly. What's this one? Some pores. Sure. Just throw it in there. Throw it all in. Maybe we do that on some of the skin up here. Let's go with getting that freckles brush. Now we could even manually paint some in, right? We don't have to use the brush for everything. We could go with a little bit of a manual application for some of these bigger ones, especially where it feels like I want to draw your attention. And sometimes it's good to just be really loud about something to just see, like, to just explore the limit, right? Like, for us to just know what is too much, and then we kind of pull back from there. So it's like I'm trying these bigger spots, and it's like, yeah, actually, I don't know. That's probably fine. It's probably better than what we had before. So let's just lean into that. And that might be the case for some of the spots down here. Like maybe we want louder spots down here as well. I think we'll do more of a dark brown for these. It's not that brown, is it? Let's try and give a little more saturation. And then we'll kind of vary it up a little bit. Kind of zoom out and see, is it noticeable? Put a little bit over here as well. And then, yeah, there's a little bit of visual rest happening here, but I think we could maybe enhance some of the details on this side. There's a little bit of a weird shadow right here that I want to tweak. There we go. Right, so details in here. I have some fun, weird organic brushes that could be cool to play with. I think we'll go ahead and again use our skin selection to limit where this is happening. Oh, that was kind of interesting there. Actually, we need to make sure we're on black, though. I'm doing this with brown. I want to keep my shadow color consistent. That's cool. I like that. It kind of creates some breakup. So again, like these brushes are not intended to always just be left alone. Like you put them in and then it gets you thinking about the form in a certain way, right? And you get suggestions through the chaos of it, and then you can kind of go in and manually remove and edit. So like this little shadow here spanning, like the form around the mouth is going like this, but then there's a break right here. And I kind of like that. It kind of creates like a counter form. So it's like, all right, let's go in there now and let's lean into that. Let's put a little bit more shadow where that intersection happens. Maybe we kind of lean into that idea a little bit more. It's very subtle, but we wouldn't have maybe thought to do that without a little bit of chaos on the canvas. And then I can do that elsewhere now. So now we kind of break it up. Suggest a little bit of that weird stretching going on. And that's cool. And some of this stuff, like, you may not have enough time to go to this length with the concept piece. This is quite rendered. But again, we're sort of still within one working day in terms of time on this piece, and so this is in theory you'd hopefully have time to bring in this level of detail on what you're working on. But see, we get that's like this visual rest here. That there's detail, but it's low relief detail, so it still is sort of visual rest. And then we get to some of this stuff up here. It kind of leads us to this stuff that's got a little bit more form to it, and it's like a little visual treat. Is this... oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I just need to kind of like bring more shadow into that area. All right, we can probably move on from this area now. I feel like it's got some fun details. I mean, we could put, I guess I could do a little more here. I mean, you could spend an eternity really, as long as you want on this stuff. But I try to allocate time to things strategically. So maybe we'll put in some veins on this hand. And yeah, I'm kind of doing form-based veins with the shadow, but you could also just do subdermal suggestion of veins by just doing it in the local color pass. This texture we applied actually has a little bit of veiny information in it, so we got a little bit for free, but you know, some veins have form, right? Bigger ones, and then there's a ton of other ones that just don't, and they're under the surface, so they're both valid things to try and think about in a design. But just to kind of show you how we might do a subdermal one, let's go to the skin variance layer. I'll select a skin tone here. I'll use my lab sliders to create a relative cold. So I'll just slide it a little bit to the left on the A and B. Then I come in here and I can paint. You can see we can add, you know, it looks very blue-green, but it's only just ever so slightly blue-green. It's based on the relative skin tone, right? And that can be really, really cool to add some of this stuff. Pretty gross stuff, but yeah, we're talking about skin and flesh, and it's kind of complicated, multi-layered sort of material, right? It's a material that's there's a lot of value in getting good at rendering flesh because there's so many designs that you're going to have to do that with. The goblins have a little bit of a darker skin tone, so we may get a little less of that transparency. It might be harder to see things like veins, so I'm not gonna do it as much with those guys. But this guy's got sort of more of like a lighter flesh tone, so maybe we'll do a little bit down here as well. And I'm painting some manually in, but you could certainly go find like a picture of veins, and you could do that as well. They're both kind of to the same effect, but this one I'm just getting a little bit more control by putting it in myself. And what could be kind of fun to do is we've got, you know, kind of like naturalistic veins up here, and then maybe the tendrils down here have glowing veins instead, right? Like the blood becomes sort of like spectral, and that could add some fun detail to the tendrils. So let's play with that. I'll go ahead and do that on a new layer here. Let's do it. So I usually have my layer stack. I'll just show you guys my layer stack so you can see kind of what I'm working with. So yeah, quite a bit of layers, but they're all with a lot of purpose. A lot of them are named. Their order is very important. The blending modes, like there's a lot of thought that goes into it, but I wanted to point out here, so all the green stuff, except for this one, let me recolorize this so it's obvious. So this is just a masking layer, a utility layer. Everything that's green here are all my flats. So things that are basically not indicating form, right? And so we might have patterns, textures in there, low relief textures, color variants, all that stuff. And then the brightness of the flats is going to indicate sort of how much light there is in you know, from the ambience. Then we have the blue layers here, which are our shadow layers. So these are all like multiplying. Try to have one for all the lights. And then I usually have a stack of add layers above the shadows and a stack of add layers below the shadows, because some additive things I want to be able to stomp on my shadows, and some things I want them to obey the existing shadows. So when I add something like glowing veins to these, I want to think for a moment, do I want them to be able to stomp on the shadows, or do I need them to obey the shadows? That choice is not always super clear, but this is something that I tend to do, is I tend to have two stacks of add sort of flanking my shadows. And it's all in a layer, so you could do it below, and then if you don't like it, you could move it above. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to go ahead and say this layer is going to be our glowing veins. And let's see. Let's go with a color dodge blending mode here as a starting point. We'll go with a I'm gonna paint with white, but I'll use an adjustment layer to make them green so that I don't have to worry about picking the right color. We'll just test that to see. Okay, so let's see. We want to go something like that, maybe. Let's go a little less saturated. Hey, Leonidas, welcome to the stream. We're painting some creepy stuff over here. Okay, so that we want to be on that layer. Great. I'm gonna start to play around with the idea of veins, and what we can do as well is if we want the veins to feel like they're deeper inside the tentacles, then we can just blur them, right? Because as stuff gets deeper, it becomes diffused, its edges become lost. But I think the point here is to just highlight how we're really thinking about our choices logically. Like by thinking about it logically, we're able to apply a level of immersion to this design that would maybe otherwise be lost. And you can think about things like how, veins toward the end of something might get a little bit smaller, a little thinner, and more frail. And maybe there's like a real big vein up here. So let's see. So see if we can play with the. You could do an animated GIF. Oh, animation, neat. We can play around with the intensity of this. So the other thing we could do is we could kind of up the intensity, right? And then we could use some variable masking to create a gradient of glow. So I'll paint with black here to kind of tone it down a little bit toward the top as it turns into real veins, and then it gets a little bit more glowy down there. And so just to show the layer stack, so I've got, the veins are on a layer that is masked by the body. They're white, and then we use the hue saturation adjustment layer to make them green. And then we stick both of those in a folder, and the folder has a mask that allows us to apply a gradient of brightness. And now I'm going to go ahead and Gaussian blur the veins so that they feel a little bit deeper in the surface. All right, so now they feel like they're buried. See that effect? You could do this with tattoos as well if you're feeling like your tattoos don't look realistic enough. It's probably because they're too sharp, right? Like images on skin just have a certain softness, right? So try that out if you're struggling to make your tattoos look convincing. Okay, let's see. I wanted to take a look at the rim lighting here because I think we could maybe afford to just have a little bit more intensity to the rim light. Yeah. Okay, let's move our lab slider out of the way. Thank you, Mr. Lab Slider. You were of great help to us. All right, let's see if we can maybe add a little more form detail here. I plan to add more emissive parts, so there was only the hat so far and the mouth. Yeah. I think those were the main things we were targeting was the mouth and the hats, and then I wanted to kind of get a little bit more subtle glow going on down here as well. Things like glow, you definitely want to kind of think about them as part of the design, but in terms of like the amount of intensity, it's really easy to kind of adjust that stuff, throw them in later if you need to. So things that I would almost consider like special effects are things that I tend to sort of leave until a little later in the render. Like I might throw in a suggestion of it, but I might be a little bit cautious about it initially, unless I'm working with a client and they really need to be able to see early on what I'm thinking. Then that would be a reason to maybe lean into it more early. But this is not something that I'm doing to show somebody else. Right? This is just we're having fun with it. So I kind of like to approach effects cautiously. So yeah, we got all these forms working, and so now when we're doing this, it feels like we're almost like we're working in ZBrush, right? Like it's like we're rendering, like we're sculpting, which is so fun. Could even introduce like some subtle like secondary contours, some of these tentacles. And I've painted a lot of characters, so I feel like reasonably confident sort of just designing as I'm rendering. But if you're newer to this, you could do like a little quick pre-comp of your render, right? Like where you're kind of making some of these decisions earlier on. That is a very valid way to work, and a lot of people do that. And sometimes I do that as well. Like it just kind of depends on what I'm working on and the complexity of it. But I think I don't know. I'm still learning this whole idea of streaming art, and I think sometimes it's fun for the audience to see you sort of do things a little bit impulsively and be a little surprised sometimes by where things go. So we're kind of playing with that here with this format. So I'm trying to play with this idea that there's some detail that kind of comes up in here, kind of cascades and gets a little hidden by this cloak. It's like implied detail, right? It's like, wow, there's got to be a lot of crazy information back there, but we can't see it, so it's not distracting us. So now maybe we should, yeah, feeling like the shadow layer's feeling pretty good. Our ambient shadows, I guess we could add a little more shadow in here. This feels like we kind of neglected to darken this enough. Let's get a little darker there. There we go. We're still going to come in and add our actual black shadows. Like I always save that for later because that's like our final, finishing move, right? It's our ultimate move, is to pop in the final value, and I like to save that. Notice that none of the shadows go completely black right now, and you probably heard some people say, "Don't ever paint with black." I don't I don't ascribe to that mentality. I did for a long time, and then I started using black, and I thought this just looks cooler. So I'm not worried about using it anymore. I just kind of do it when I feel like it's a good choice. But yeah, obviously there could be reasons why, like a certain style is doesn't look right if you use black. So like, I'm speaking more from like a just making personal art standpoint. But like for instance, if you're working on like Hearthstone art, you really don't want to be using black shadows in Hearthstone art. That would look very weird. I think we're getting some cool form information in there. Right. So yeah, let's start to oh actually there was one other thing I wanted to kind of like bring in a little bit more sort of weird shadowy shape stuff in the hat here. I felt like we were getting a little bit too simple with some of these shapes. So let's just give it a little bit more form, a little bit of wrinkliness. Okay. And a little couple little dots here and there. I think this shoulder here is a very prominent shape. I think it'll be fun later to add some damage to this, like some slashes, some like unraveling of the fabric or something. And we'll have a pass on this, like a damage and wear pass as well. Even though we've got some of it already, we'll try to have another pass at that. Yeah, maybe we get in here and we sort of hit these goblins up a little bit more. I don't want to neglect these guys; they're important as well. So I think we're doing pretty good with them, but let's give them a little bit more love. It's feeling more 3D. That's good. Yeah, yeah. That's the hope. Kind of just like getting in and realizing the subtle halftones more is just a way to kind of make it feel a little bit more 3D. These are like, I guess they're sort of like muscular goblins. I don't know. I don't know that we had a lot of like specific design thought in the body types of these guys. They're like they're like they're almost like props in this image. Certainly we could have gone further with their designs. Okay, this guy here. And then you have like local colors in here. It helps you to know to like, okay, do I have to just lean into the shadow a little more to get this idea to read? Sometimes you got to push it a little bit. Like obviously something that's all white, the shadows are going to read very easily on that. Whereas if something goes really, really dark, then you may have to revise. I guess we could get a little bit of ambience here more from the hand. Tiny gob hand on the big monster hand. What is that? That's a really sloppy shadow right there. Let's kill that. Okay. Let's see now. Hands. Again, hands are very expressive. Hands are, like they rival faces in terms of expressiveness, right? So we want to also be thinking about some fun details on the hands that we can bring in. Weird wrinkles and things. Okay, let's see about this hand here. I'll put a little more shadow in this pocket in general. Okay, cool. Yeah, so let's go ahead and bring in some of the reflections now from the main light we've got going on. And so we'll go ahead and do that on the add stack under the shadows. I don't want these reflections to stomp on those. And again, I'm just going to paint with white because I can always tint this with its own sort of adjustment layer if I need to. Painting with white just makes it easy. So now just to be clear, like what we're doing now is we're kind of describing a range of the halftones that has been sort of missing. Now, not all materials will warrant having these sort of upper halftones. Like it just might be a very diffuse surface. Like if it's a burlap sack, for example, like you're not going to have a lot of information in the upper halftones unless the light is getting like really crazy, right? But we're talking about skin here, and skin in certain areas, especially, can warrant some of this upper halftone information. So we're gonna try and bring that in. Just looking at some reference of some skin so that I can stay faithful to that. Specularity is one of those things that tends to screw up people a lot. Like it's really easy to mess up your image if you do specularity wrong. So I think it's kind of nice that with this particular process, I sort of leave specularity for a little bit later when I'm feeling a little more sure about what the forms want to be. But, hopefully what you're kind of seeing here is how this pass is like really helpful to help us understand the material better. And some materials, it's like critical, right? Like imagine if you were to try and render a mirror and you didn't think about reflections. It would be invisible. So that's like maybe a dumb example because it's so extreme, but you get the idea. It's like oily skin here, and again it's its own layer, so I can dial this if I need to, if I get a little too aggressive about it. But and that tends to happen because it's easy to go too far, and it also just kind of like starts to look really cool and fun. It's fun to add this stuff, so you can push it too far very easily. But just to kind of show you guys an example of how we can sort of suggest coloration to that that ambient lighting, I can bring in hue, saturation, adjustment layer, colorize, and we can make this like a blue color. Right, you see how that's got like a kind of a bluish tint now. And we can even bring up the brightness a little bit. So just ever so subtly cooler. And not like more radical, but cooler as in temperature wise cooler. And that can be, again, kind of a good choice when you've got more of like a warmer light coming from another direction. We can always flip to grayscale as well to kind of see how that's reading. And when we got things that are like really kind of like wet, like a lip or a gum or something, we can definitely get a little more aggressive about some of these specular details. I just had a first session with a new student today. Really cool new student, and we were talking a little bit about how just, you know, a lot of surfaces are very diffused, and it's easy to kind of overdo specularity. It's definitely a fun thing to think about, and as you're sort of just like looking at your world, uh, you know, it's part of, I think, what's the natural process of improving your art is you sort of pay attention to more things around you artistically. Like you might be, you know, I don't know, eating dinner, and then you're not really thinking about the food. You're like looking at the reflections on the glass on the table. It's like, yeah, that kind of just comes with the territory, right? You just get a little bit weirdly distracted and obsessed about visual phenomena, and that's a good sign, though. Yeah, Tom, yeah, it's Ian. Yeah, we had our first session today. It was great. He's got a lot of great, he's got a great start on everything. Looks like he's been studying hard, so that'll hopefully allow him to get the most out of the course. So yeah, excited to see how that all goes. That's a weird shadow. What's going on with that shadow? Did I just like work that shadow? Yeah, I kind of did that sloppily. Okay, we'll fix that up. There we go. And I probably should name. Oh no, I already did name this. Okay, good. Yeah, see that though? Look at that effect, right? Just crazy information that happens with that layer. It's a little bit unfortunate that some of these cooler, quote unquote, cooler effects um, kind of come a little later in the process. But once you've done this process a few times and you sort of know when that's going to happen and the effect that it has, it's almost sort of like a dessert at the end of the meal. So I do always look forward to getting in and being able to define this stuff. And a little bit of those weird forehead wrinkles. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely be trying to do my best to steer him in the right direction. So yeah, when you're doing specularity, the other thing to think about is there's a tendency to want to potentially put the highlight at the highest point of all the forms, which is not always correct, right? Like one like really easy example that I give is when you're doing highlights on like a muscular chest. Just notice how the position of the light can cause the crevice between the pecs to become very bright. You know, like that's not the highest point on the chest, right? Like the pecs are bulging out, and then the crest between the two, you'd think, oh well, that's got to be a shadow. But think about how that that line between the pecs is really like the sort of barrel chest of the rib cage. It's the dome of the rib cage, or that sphere of the rib cage, and the sphere of the rib cage has its own apex, right? And that apex might be facing the light, and so it becomes illuminated. So you can kind of think about how where the light is positioned and how it might be kind of hitting the maybe the crack between forms versus the top of the forms. Uh, you'll see it with a face where you know you think that like the crease in here might be always in shadow because it's a crease, but like nope, you get the light in a certain way, and then boom, there's like this crazy highlight that happens right in this little transition area. Um, that's the kind of stuff where like you kind of want to start to like pay attention to that in real life. So you, when you're doing stuff like this, you can bring in some of that subtlety. I get a little bit more extreme with the highlight on the end of the nose here because I want this to feel kind of like wet. Okay, that might have been a little too far. Okay, sure. So skin again. We're kind of trying to create a little bit of this like oily surface, especially again on like the face where you might have some oil going on. And when we do this pass on like the hat, for example, I'm going to be very careful about how I'm going to approach this. Like I might go for like a much bigger brush here, and I might try to just bring in a little bit of blue, and I might just take my my smudge tool and I might like really diffuse this out. You know, trying to kind of create like upper half tones. So you can see here, they're describing form. They're helping us feel the cylinder of this, but notice like how much more diffused they are than what we were doing on the face. That distinction between specular fall off is critical. It's critical. If you do this wrong, it's going to look weird. It's going to look like now your hat is made of like plastic or something, right? And it's going to kill it. And there's some artists that are just really good about specular control. You can make an image look very naturalistic by just being very, very controlled about this kind of stuff. Um, is it, let me see. I'm going to quickly mention an artist, but I want to make sure I get their name right. Let me see if I can just quickly Google this. Yeah, artist name is Piotr Jablonski, spelled Jablonski. It's an artist that I tend to point students to a lot when I'm talking about controlled specularity because that guy's a master of it. He can get a piece to read with everything feeling like it's just so diffused. And so, yeah, take a look at that work. Okay, so now we're going to try to do controlled specularity on this shoulder area here. Again, bringing in some of that nice, like, relative kind of cool blue tone. But I'm thinking about upper half tone. I'm thinking about the spherical nature of this, and I'm trying to think about the material as well, that it doesn't want to feel super shiny. Yeah, he's got such cool stuff, man. I really, I think I also like, I have a sort of like list of artists that I tend to talk about because I feel like their style is very obvious to demonstrate certain concepts in art. Like some artists are great artists, but like their work is just too like um I don't know, it just exists in this style place where it's harder to sort of speak to a certain principle with certain artists, like and that has nothing to do with like them being good or bad, right? It's just it happens to be the nature of trying to explain concepts. Some artists are better as an example of certain ideas. So yeah, he happens to be really good for explaining the idea of diffuse specularity. And again, you can consider the style as well. Like some styles just want to be very, very subtle. Yeah, I think in terms of thinking about like even more extreme examples of like some of that material adherence, we could think about like Sitzlaw Beksinski. Like if you look at his work, like he's like so particular about the feel of his materials, right? Like obviously in his like compositions and like everything about his work, he's very particular about it. But like his material choices he's just incredibly picky about his material choices. So the other thing we can do with with this passive specularity is we can kind of indicate some additional form that we felt like might have been missing in the shadow pass. It's a little bit of a hack, to be honest, but if we wanted to kind of bring a little bit more fold quality into this little nook, this little area here, then I sometimes will just kind of use the highlight pass to indicate that. You can make something feel a little bit more weighted and pushed in if you enhance the contrast around it. So we're not just using shadow underneath this to help us feel the weight of it, but we're also bringing a little bit of highlight on just the opposite side of the shadow, as if it's pushing in and the cloth is bulging out just beyond that. Again, we're sort of like using two ideas there in combination, that each of them are sort of like working in concert to help each other. This entire pass I'm doing underneath my shadows, so that way it never stomps on any of that information that I put in. I'm always much more afraid to do reflections on diffuse surfaces because I feel like it's so easy to screw them up. Let's go ahead and do this chest area here. And I think this is safer for us to do a little bit more of like an oily treatment on this. The specular dots on the nose are your favorite part. Yeah, it's a fun part to paint too, I'll tell you. Like it's sort of like we're being like really kind of reserved and controlled everywhere, so that way when we want to make a loud statement like that, we can do it with authority. So maybe that's why it's like, maybe that's why it's working well for you, because it's like we're kind of giving you a little like visual reward in that area. So let's see, am I just supposed to be leaning into this in a broader way? Maybe. Let's see. I'm going to play with this and see. The other thing to remember is, hey, new follower, glad you could join us. Is that surfaces have specular reflections and diffuse reflections, right? Like most materials have a bit of both going on. So, we could have like a sort of like a big broad fall off to this fatty peck area, and then we might have a little apex of highlight on it as well. So, again, just another complexity of materials, right? So this is kind of what we were talking about earlier. This kind of area between the pecs where you'd think, oh well, this is supposed to be in shadow because it's like a crack or a crevice, but I like always exploring the idea that maybe that form is actually getting lit by the light. You have to make sure that it makes sense with what you're doing, but it could be a cool choice in terms of helping explain the form. I could do, let's see, a little bit of extra there. Okay. Yeah, I think that's working all right. Oh, we're definitely going to get some crazy specularity in this mouth area, right? That'll be fun. as it gets closer to this section, definitely kind of lean into it here. And we haven't even added subsurface scattering to this rim light kind of bleeding through the skin here. That'll also look really, really cool. There's a lot of layers, you know, like if you think about surfaces and everything. If you really want to get in there and describe it all correctly, it just takes some time. But it's super rewarding though. Like, you know, that's the thing about you know, I don't necessarily want to be spending a lot of time, wasting a lot of time talking about AI nonsense on this channel at all, but I will just quickly mention that there is like a very rewarding feeling for being able to create something from your head through your understanding of how it works and a display of technical ability like that. That hard work pays off, right? Like it really is a rewarding experience versus just like clicking a button and having a computer tell you what it's supposed to be. Like that is there's nothing there, right? It's just slop. So that's my 2 cents on it. Okay, we get some form description there. Again, we can always flip to grayscale to see how we're doing with this. Is it feeling like we're going too far with it? Whatever. I might want to just hit a little bit harder with some of this stuff right here at the top. Okay. And then, yeah, maybe there's like some wetness right pooling in between the tooth and the gum line there. Maybe it even kind of like drips down a little bit. I remember one time I was doing a study of a Hydralisk from StarCraft, and I was trying to get all the materials to look good on it, and it was like really getting obsessed with all of the like cool, like wet, gross materials it had. I mean, we could even have like some weird like drool dripping down. I don't think I want to do that on this layer, but we'll see if we maybe want to like add some of that later. Okay, maybe we'll give a little bit more here. Oh, that's a little too far. Pull back. Okay. Right. I think that's starting to feel pretty convincing. I might want to go back and just add a little more shadow to this little area here. Oh, gross. It's like, yeah, it's good that we're able to execute, but it's also just getting it more disgusting looking. Just like, I don't know if I want to be looking at this whole time. I painted some pretty gross stuff though. Like I worked on some projects that needed some pretty gross stuff painted. So I guess I'm sort of immune at this point. Okay, what were we doing? Okay, this was the spec layer, right? Whoops. Oh, I just completely hid that. There we go. Disappeared on me. Okay, there's the spec layer. Yeah, it's kind of fun to see that turned on and off, right? Time for the tongue. Let's see. I guess we probably want to like go kind of heavy with the spec on this thing. I'm gonna try to like model it a little bit, create a little bit of surface breakup to that. I guess the other thing worth mentioning is that like we don't really have like a super strong key light in the scene. I mean, the key light is kind of our rim light. We kind of lean into that, right? So, you know, we wouldn't necessarily see a lot of these super hot highlights. Like if you think about a shiny metal robot on a cloudy day, like he's probably not going to look that shiny, right? So like the all those things need to be factored in. But where the eye is expecting to see detail, we don't want to kind of like treat your eye to that detail. And we're going to do a trick later too where we like selectively sharpen some of these spots of detail so that it feels like there's more detail here than there really is. Yeah, again, like we got the simple form and then we get like extreme detail in here, and the contrast between the two means that there's a little less pressure on us to get crazy with the detail in here because this is less detailed over here. If we were to go crazy with the detail here, then my God, we'd have to kill ourselves on this section. It's not to say that we would never want to do that, but we'd want to make sure we had enough time to devote to that. And the other thing too is we haven't even like merged this. We're still kind of operating in layered mode. So kind of zoom out here and just kind of take a quick look at what's going on overall. Let's see. Mouth is starting to take its spot as your favorite part. Cool, cool, yeah. I mean, it's sort of like the surprise element, right? Like he's revealing his stomach and then he's like gobbling up these ghosts. Saliva, juiciness. Yeah, I think we'll do it. Yeah, I think we'll definitely add some. We already started to imply a little bit of drippiness on the tongue over here. I think we'll definitely have some on the mouth there as well. I think that's definitely a good call. I'm gonna try to get a little more shadow in on this section here. You have to do a little bit of comparative analysis when you're talking about values. Like if you went so dark in one area for a certain level of form, then you have to be consistent about that. So I just want to stay faithful to those choices. Let's see. I don't know that I care for that level of shadow there. Let's pull that back a little bit. I'll lean into it right in there. And we'll put a little more shadow underneath this weird feature. Again, I don't know why snakes have this weird thing in there, but I assume there's some very important purpose for that. I'm just going to put a little bit of highlight on that section there. Okay, let's see. Now we're thinking about this all as like kind of a spherical mass. So I'm going to try to be good about how the specular reflection follows that idea. So let's just see if that's doing what we want. I think that's doing what we want. I'm going to try to kind of follow that through over here as well. And let's just pull it back just ever so slightly. There we go. Okay. This is where, like, if you practice rendering spheres, it's like, well, here you go. Like, it's just not a sphere. It's much more complex, but it really is just relying on us being able to render a convincing sphere. Okay, cool. Bringing a little bit of diffused light on this area here. I don't want to do too crazy here because we want it to feel like the rim light is nice and bright. And hit a little bit of the edge of this belt. Okay, let's get a nice diffuse highlight here. I'm gonna have to go real broad with this, but our goal here is that we want to sort of get this like tubular shape, these pipe folds to read. So I'm gonna kind of like pull in a little bit of highlight at the apex and then just diffuse it out. But so hopefully you can kind of see though, like that's like important, right? It's really diffused, but it's explaining form and helping it fit in with our overall scheme. I used to really neglect the diffused highlights. If you look at some of my work earlier on, it's like kind of missing, right? Or like improperly described. I would hope that I'm getting better at that. It's a tough one. I think it's just for me. I mean, different things are going to be tough for every artist, right? Like you're going to have your pros and cons, or your strengths and weaknesses, and yeah, for me, just like upper half tone stuff. Oh, it's just like, man, hurts my brain. I mean, I understand it, but like just dialing it in to be perfect is has been one of the trickier things to get right. Should we go a little higher with this one here? Maybe we just hit that a little bit harder. I want to get that one kind of coming towards us a little bit stronger. Check our gray values. Yeah. All right. Neat. Let's go ahead and bring in some of that on the weird body here. So this is essentially like a bending cylinder, right? So we can kind of think about it like that. And I think I'll go, more diffused to the top, and then we'll go a little bit more shiny as it goes down here to the tentacles, the tentacles. So, you thought this looked 3D before, but we didn't even have the diffused reflections in here. So like now it's like, whoa. And that's a good sign, right? Like if you can get it to read convincingly three-dimensional without relying on heavy specularity, then you're definitely in a good spot. Should I have that catch a little bit of light right there? Ooh, yeah, that's good. I like that one. Now, some of the specularity may interfere with the readability of our glowing veins, but I'm okay with that. And again, we can always tweak that with its own layer. We can make that glow brighter. Special effects, save those to the end. Get it to read good without special effects, and then that's just icing on the cake later. So when I'm painting this, notice I'm kind of like breaking it up a little bit, and that's just so that way the surface is a little more interesting, is a little more organic. Versus if it's a very like precise, perfect highlight, then it might start to feel a little bit more like manufactured or like plastic or something. Let's just give it a little bit of that randomness. The other thing to think about too, with regard to reflections on skin, is that when the skin is stretched tighter over the bone, then it's going to create a smoother surface, and a smoother surface is going to have more specular reflection. So, for like a bent knee is going to have more reflectivity on it than a relaxed knee. Okay, yeah, I'm liking that kind of like wet situation going on with the tentacles here. Let's should we I think maybe we should go in now and add specularity on the goblins. Or no, you know, let's do his arms. We'll do his arms and then we'll do the goblins. I think that's a good plan, so we can kind of finish off specularity on each of these guys. The other thing you can do too is you can hit the veins with a little bit of highlight as well. Again, kind of like using this layer as a way to describe a little bit extra form. And kind of a hack, but if it's a vein that's got enough volume, then you know there's reasons it might be getting hit with that reflectivity. So again, we've got like a bent finger and a sort of a taut piece of skin over that knuckle, so it's a great place for us to have a little bit of extra shine. This is essentially the same thing as the knee example I was giving earlier. Okay, I'm gonna crease that a little bit more there. Okay. The other thing you can do is look for where the end of a cast shadow happens, and you can lean into the specular reflection just beyond the edge of that, because it's sort of like where that contrast wants to live. And it kind of represents that, like, you know, angle of the light as it's hitting the form. Okay, let's keep a little bit here, and then let's go kind of diffuse with the thumb, a little tighter with the thumb joint. And then we'll kind of like leave some of this stuff alone down here because it's sort of like not getting directly lit. Maybe I'll bring a little bit more highlight right there on that hat. Just ever so slightly more. Yeah, it's kind of cool because we've got like the warm rim light with a little bit of the glow. We've got the local colors that have some relative yellows and reds, and then we've got some of the blue ambient from above. Um, as we zoom out, the color palette feels sort of limited, but there's complexity on a secondary layer, right? So it doesn't feel flat. And this is another question I sometimes will get is, how do you make a limited palette not feel monochromatic, right? And it's in all of this secondary color play that's going on, all these little relative warm and cool choices. Um, yeah. Honestly, I learned that by looking at Brahms art. If you guys want to go look at an amazing artist, check out Gerald Brahm. Loved his work since I was pretty young, and he is so great at bringing in lots of subtle color variation within a limited palette, and really making use of subtle textures and stuff. Like, yeah, he's just so great at that. So I think my love and appreciation of his work, I think, allowed me to try and bring that into my work a little bit. Okay, let's see. Right, so specularity on the goblins. Let's go ahead and hit that a little bit. Oh, see, so now I'm going to want to do a reflection on that eye on my additive layers above my shadow so I can stomp on that shadow in the pupil there. So that's again why I have those two different ones. It will lean into that side. Switch into a stronger brush to get some of these wet highlights on the gums. If you're ever like working on this stuff and you're just like not sure what to do next, it just means that you're reaching your limit in terms of your internal knowledge, right? You got to go look externally, look at references, look at other artists. That'll happen more, well, depending on where you're at in your art journey. Like, it could happen kind of right away. It might be at the very beginning of a piece you don't know what to do. That's fine. But as you get more and more advanced, that phase of running out of ideas of what to do next will probably happen later. And so don't be afraid to like bring in a new phase of references and inspirations later. If you're feeling like you're kind of hitting your limit on what you can say with your own process and knowledge. Reflections on darker tones are always really satisfying because they just show up easier, right? If you're ever working on armor and it's not looking reflective, then just take the base color and make it darker and start again, and I bet you'll have a better time with it. Oh well, the anatomy got a little bit nasty there. Let's try and clean that up. Okay. Where was I here? Okay, now a little bit of a more diffused. Again, we're kind of thinking about the upper half tones of this shape. Now maybe we'll give it a little bit of specular reflection. It's a little shinier maybe. Kind of really don't have an opportunity to do that little fun in between highlight on those pecs, so we'll just kind of go with a kind of a square highlight on the edge here. And then this one over here, I don't want to do too much because it's got the rim light on it, but we'll give it a little hit on this arm. And get the lip nice and shiny there. I might kill the highlight there. Maybe go for more of that description. And I'm going to just take a soft eraser and I'm just going to kind of pull back a little bit on these because I feel like it's gotten a little bit aggressive. So just a slight toning down of that. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that looks good. This brush here is in my resources inbox. The most common reason people don't find it is because they're looking in the place you would expect to look, which is in the brushes presets. It's not a brush preset; it's a tool preset. So check in the tool presets. All the brush presets are cool, but they're actually not the things that I use all the time. It's the tool presets that have all of the kind of like, well, I don't know. I'm using the tool presets 90% of the time that I'm painting. And I don't know if you've noticed, but like most of this painting is done with this particular brush. Like I can just do most of what I need with it. And then we use other ones for textures and things like that. Okay, let's get to this other gob here. I think what we might do, guys, is because I feel like I'm kind of getting close to being able to wrap this up, but I don't know that I can wrap it up in the next 4 minutes. So I think what we may do is we may just have a little bit of an extended stream tonight. Maybe tack on another little bit of time here so that I can get this wrapped up on this session, because I also don't think I have enough on this to where I'd want to just give it a whole nother stream. So I think we'll just add a little bit of time. So we can kind of give it like it's like finishing touch. So there's a few things I definitely want to do with this before we move on. I want to get this head feeling a little bit more spherical. Okay. The piercings, nice. Yeah, those are a fun little like extra detail on these guys. You can put a little bit on these ears here. This guy's got some pretty aggressive texturing going on. I think it's fine, but it does make some of these highlights a little harder to read. Okay, nope, I don't like that. I'm going to leave it there on that little raised brachioradialis there. In fact, I'm going to kill the highlight there. I'm just going to go with the highlight right there, because that's sort of where that planar transition is happening anyway. Okay, then this is going to taper here, so let's start a specular highlight at this planar change from the wrist into the hand. This process is like, you know, just there's a lot to do in an illustration or a concept piece to render it all out, and you just have to kind of be systematic about it. You just go from part to part and like a checklist in your mind of, okay, did we describe that? Did we describe this? Did we factor that in? And that's kind of the only way I know to approach it. When I first started doing digital illustrations, you know, I don't have a traditional background in painting. I did a lot of traditional drawing, but not a lot of painting. And so when I started doing digital painting, my process was a complete mess. It just was terrible. And one of the things that I didn't like about it was the fact that I never knew where I was in the process or how far along I was in the painting. Like I didn't know. It's like, is this done? Like, do I need to just redo it? Like, it never felt clear to me. And that chaotic quality was really off-putting, and also made it really hard to be able to work with clients, like to predictably finish things and deliver a certain level of quality. Like it was just not, it wasn't ready for prime time. And when I was able to kind of like figure out a process that was systematic, like it just, you know, I can predict how long something's going to take. I can generally tell you like how much is left of a piece. Those are all like really, really important things to be able to control in a production environment, or be able to predict. And it's not 100%. Certainly there are like curveballs, but you know, you have a baseline that is likely going to be at least somewhat accurate, or that's the hope anyway, right? Okay, there's a weird shadow there. I need to complete that. There we go. Okay, so we got the specularity on the gobs. We got it on. So hopefully you guys, when I turn this layer on and off, you can kind of see how like it's really, really important. But it isn't necessarily like super loud in all these places, right? It's just like a really important sort of extra layer to the form information. And again, if we feel like we've gone too strong with it, I can always turn it down a little bit more, right? We can kind of go. Well, actually, there's our key. I was adjusting the key light, so we can even go stronger with our key light, right? Look at that. We can go. This is again like the idea of setting up your scene so that way you can like kind of control it like it's a 3D scene, right? Like we could even go a little heavier with that. Kind of like a little bit heavier on that shadow. Helps everything pop a little bit more. I think the value range feels a little more complete. Okay, take a quick water break here. If you're working on something, remember to save your work. Don't lose your stuff. That always sucks. Oh, thanks, Patrick. Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I've been staring at this guy for a while, so I'm starting to get that like that dreaded numbness to it. So that's I think why also I just kind of want to power. I think the rest of this will just spend another let's spend another 30 minutes together, and then wrap this up. So what do we want to do here? I want to get some reflections on the metallic bits. So he's got these clasps, and then he's got the belt buckles. Why am I doing this distinctly now on like its own phase? Because I like to have metallic highlights on a different blending mode. It's going to be a little bit less noticeable here because all of the metal is gray. But if you're working with colored metals, it's really helpful to have them on a blending mode other than normal. So let's add a new add layer here. I'll call this MS for metallic specularity. You can even put in parentheses key because we're defining the specular reflections from the key light. I mean, you could get really nutty with it. I kind of try to keep it a little bit at bay. And then I think for this one, we'll go ahead and do a linear dodge because we're working with gray metals. And in this phase, you can go ahead and use like a texture brush to bring in even more sort of detail into the specular highlights. I have some brushes that sort of bring in a little bit more of that detail, which is kind of nice. I feel like the forms are a little getting lost in there. You might have to help the shadows out a little bit in that section. Let's see. Yeah. Oops. Okay. Yeah, I'm not in love with the way that looks. Let's tweak that a little bit more. There we go. And then key shadows got a little sloppy. We were a little sloppy with our key shadows. I feel like we should have just been a little bit more careful with those. Especially now that they're like more obvious than they were before. Ended up turning them up a little bit louder. That's all good. Right. Okay, back to the metallic highlights. And you could even use like a lasso here to help you stay in a region. So like we could kind of hit this little bit of heat right there. You see how like this brush has a little bit of like chaos to it, and it just kind of helps that metal feel a little bit more detailed, bring in a little extra sparkle. You could do this with skin as well, if you wanted to have the skin feel a little bit more like bring out the pores and stuff. If you're rendering something and it's that close, that can be worth it. I didn't feel like it was worth it on this one, but I have done that sometimes. There's a shadow oopsie right there. I kill that and kill that. Am I on the right one? Hard erase hard. Yep, and kill that. I guess we sort of need more shadow here. Bring in more shadow here. And here. Let's smudge it a little bit so it feels a little bit less like a physical, like a form. We want it to feel like a shadow. You can just do all of your shadows hard edged and then just run like a Gaussian blur on all of them to make them just feel a little bit less cartoony. That definitely can work. Yeah, it might even be worth it to add a little bit of extra detail to this stuff here. Maybe we'll add like another little kind of like bevel or something to it. I just feel like we were missing a little bit of extra information to these. I'm just using my ambient shadow layer to do this because it's form information. I mean, you could do this on the texturing side of things, but it's trying to indicate a little bit of extra form. And now we're taking a lot of liberties here. I'm going to kind of this is a hack, is using a little bit of extra ambient shadow at the core of the form to help indicate a little more reflected light. Because if this is darker, then it feels like there's light hitting the underside. It's a total hack, but it's a fun little thing you can do. What's going on up here? I got a little wacky. Let's fix that. A little bit of extra shadow here. Yeah. A little extra shadow here. Yeah. Nice. You're hitting Control S 10 times a minute. Dude, yes, I know. I know what you're saying. I do the same thing. The texturing's nice. Thanks, dude. Would I use the same workflow if the piece would be for a marketing illustration? Yeah, I mean, maybe not exactly the same, but there'd be like a lot of similarities. I think when you're dealing with marketing illustrations, a lot of times you're dealing with things that aren't needing design work. They're already designed, and then you're sort of like posing them and stuff. So, I think the fact that there isn't as much conceptual work in that means that the process changes a little bit, right? But I don't know if there would be anything dramatically different. I still like to approach my scenes in these sort of logical passes. I just tend to get better results that way. Yeah, okay, let's see. So we've got, I guess the tongue here needed a little bit of extra definition. So let's kind of get here and define this tongue a little bit better. And we can get maybe a little bit of specularity on some of these teeth here. I think we could get a little bit more red in some of this area as well. So let's go down to our skin variation. And I'll go ahead and isolate the skin layer so we can sample. This isn't that gross looking, that base layer we've got. But I'm doing that so that I can establish the base color, and then I can go relative to that. And now we can come in here and we can really inject some good reds into this section. And I feel safe doing it here because this is our focal point, right? So if we go like heavier with the saturation here, it's just totally safe, right? And we even get a little bit more red around the eyes. And I can kind of bring in a little bit more saturation in here. Yeah. Okay. We were doing, metallic highlights. I need to finish that up on a couple of the buckles here. This is a part of the issue of you bouncing around a little bit, right? Is that you can get distracted. But that tends to happen for me on a piece that's a little later on, is I tend to kind of get pulled in certain directions. If you're really struggling with that, actually funny enough, Patrick, you you actually got this specific suggestion from me in one of your pieces was to create a little like barn door, window, and just kind of move it around and just kind of focus on an area that you feel like you're not spending enough time on. Uh, and that can definitely help you from constantly just bouncing back to the parts that you're either like, painting, you enjoy them painting them more or whatever it is, right? Can be a bit of an issue. Oh, I wanted to bring in a little bit more shadowing here because I was concerned that that hand is not reading as easily. So let's do that. Yeah. Okay. Good. Our highlight layers on top can be the place to bring in some highlights that stomp on our shadows. So we can bring in like a little highlight there. Maybe there's a little bit of extra reflectivity here on this eye. Probably want to put it on these guys as well. So I'm thinking about the fact that like, even though these are glowing, they're still a physical material, right? So they still are going to kind of like react like a sphere would to wherever this light is coming from. Maybe a little bit of reflectivity. Let's see, the glow is that layer there. So let's pick our green. And let's see, do we want to like bring in a little bit of that glow? Oh, that's a little too yellow. How did I get that wrong? Let's see. Blue. Let's try that. And this is 100%. Oh, it's on color dodge. Let's do this on a new layer. I want to bring in a little bit of that glow too. A couple spots here around the eyes. Just a subtle amount. And maybe there's just a little bit kind of spilling away from the eye there, just slightly. We could play around with like a little bit of like kind of magical smoke coming away from the eyes. So let's play around with that here as well. Just kind of breaking up a little bit of that simple like digital round brush here. Yeah, that's looking better. So I mean, I don't know. Hopefully, you guys can see how like if you spend enough time on something, you can start to make it look quite rendered, right? We can get really crazy with this if we want to. We can start to add some glow hitting the ears. Again, light is additive, so our strategy is working. We've got rim light, we've got hat light. We can do a little bit of like a little bit. I like sometimes little like speckles to the light as well. I have a brush for that. I think it's a splatter. No, it's not. Where is it? Is it under? I always forget. I think it's in grunge. Yeah, speckles. So we can give a little bit of, see a little bit of this kind of like little dotting here. Okay, it's kind of like stuff that would be hard for us to paint manually, very, very time consuming, but it just kind of adds a little extra detail to that section. You can even do it maybe to the eyes here a little bit. Just a couple little flecks here and there. The values are reading pretty well in that section. Looking like glowing hair. Yeah. You're using some of my tips. That's awesome, dude. Yeah, I'm glad it's helping. How much has my workflow changed early on compared to recently? Assume it's been this way for a long time by now, judging how efficient and comfortable you are with it. Um, yeah, it's been fairly stable for the last 5 years, I'd say. There's been like little kind of tweaks and improvements here and there, but there hasn't been any like revolutionary changes to it in the recent past. But yeah, at first it was like evolving massively. Like there were really big realizations going on, big tweaks and changes happening all the time to that. Um, okay, let's see. So we got that. I think I want to do a little bit of that here as well to that. I'll show you guys a fun tricks if we do. Let's see, we do this and then we go here. Whoops. Go lasso and then we go warp. We can give these particles a sense of motion, like they're kind of like flowing out of the mouth there, instead of doing like a motion blur on it. Let's give a little bit of glow around the monster eyes here. Just a little bit. Maybe we'll give a little bit of glow to the mouth here. It's a little extra pop. Okay, now I think what we can do is we can start to introduce a little bit of atmosphere to push some of these elements back in the piece. So that's going to be another add layer here on top. This is where you want to be sure about your background colors and tones, because you're going to basically be using those to push things back in atmosphere. I think I might have the tentacles. Yes, I do. Okay, good. So we're going to take the background and I'm going to kind of push this stuff back a little bit back here. I'm going to try to suggest a little bit of like a foggy atmosphere. Again, remember that one of our original ideas with this was this like kind of Jack the Ripper thing, and I'm thinking of like a foggy London, and how, you know, that might be kind of cool to kind of play with that here, pushing things back a bit. And again, it's on its own layer, so we can easily play with how far we're going to go with this idea. Okay, we kind of selectively push some of this stuff back. Again, there's a little bit of like a taking a little bit of artistic liberty with some of this stuff, pushing it back. We're also going to play with some lost edges in a moment here as well. I'll overlay some additional textures, but I think, yeah, so we get a little bit of atmosphere is kind of cool. Okay, let's play with a little bit of extra glow on the tentacles down here. Let's get that color going on. I'm gonna be really careful about this though, because you can definitely take this too far. I don't want to draw your eye too far away from the top of him. Okay, let's pull it back just slightly. Got a little aggressive right there. Just little hints of that glow, I think is good. One thing that helps with this area is that since the background is lighter here, when this gets glowy, it doesn't feel like there's as much value contrast, right? So we can be brighter with the glow and it won't pull our eye as much, whereas up here, like, you know, this is an area where there's a lot of that going on. Let's go ahead and bring in some of that subsurface scattering happening. that's another thing we need to make sure we do. So this one, I actually like to use a soft light for this. And we're just going to basically take some of that red, and we can pull it a little bit orange. And I'm going to look for sort of like where that light is going to kind of spill through the skin. And I suppose we might even get a little bit of that coming through where this glow is happening, right? You also want to think about where there's a lot of bright light, how there's a lot of bounce light going on, and you're going to just get some overall illumination going on to that area. So, you know, we can kind of like, it kind of justifies bringing in just a little bit of sort of just general sort of like reflected light overall in this area, right? Just a little bit of that kind of, well, it's basically, if you guys are gamers, you'll know the idea of ray tracing, right? So essentially this is like a ray tracing pass where we're thinking about, you know, is there a little bit of like kind of bounce light going on, lighting up more of the forms. Again, we're going to do it more up here because this is where light is really, really intense. It can make all the difference just thinking about some of those sort of like secondary ideas. That might actually got a little too orange. Let me see if I shift it a little more red. Yeah, there we go. Got a little too orange on me. And it's just like, I think that the color choice was initially right, but the way it was interacting with the colors on the surface, I think were a little bit too much. Right. So yeah, what are the finishing touches? So what we can do now is I can basically just take the character and I can like you know, kind of merge them together so we can just kind of paint on top of them. So I'll duplicate this, hide that. I'll just merge it together. We're going to lose a little bit of that interaction with the background. I'm fine with that. I didn't want that there anyway. So now this is just a single layer. Now we can do things like lost edges, which is always fun, right? Kind of get in here and just kind of play with a few of these things, like kind of disappearing into the background, which is something that would be kind of hard to do with a layered process, right? We're kind of affecting everything together. You could see it in an art book. Oh, that would be really fun. I'm sure like maybe at some point there'll be a reason to try to do some kind of a collection of stuff maybe. So here we're kind of just playing with like a little bit more like a raggedy edge to this stuff. Again, like the kind of getting rid of that like super digital feel. Like we don't want it to feel like super clean and mechanical, which a layered process can sometimes do that. So this is like in an effort to make things feel a little bit more painterly. This is a stage where you can actually spend quite a bit of time on this like over paint stage if you want to. I'm a little careful because we have a lot of like kind of micro texture work going on, and when we do the smudging, we can really destroy some of that. So just be cautious. But if everything is super crisp and hard edge, then nothing will feel crisp and hard edge. So I try to have a little bit of this softness here and there to help break it up. And then, you know, just some like damage, right? Like just some kind of random damage. It can be fun to inject this phase. Let's get square brush going. I wanted there to be a little bit more information here in this section. And it's a little bit of like eye candy. then the two things that we need to still do is we need to bring in our hyper blacks, and we need to bring in our selective sharpening. And that'll kind of be like the final touch. I know you guys are like, wow, this thing is just like going on and on. What the hell? Well, I warned you that this is what's going to happen if we do a full render on the channel, is that we'll be here for a little bit as we show all these steps. If you guys want to see like, yeah, what are all the steps to making something look quite complete? Well, you're seeing it. It just takes several passes. I need to actually, I forgot to kind of hit these with a little bit of that reflective white from the environment here. So let's get that going. And we're going to add a little more saliva to the mouth as well. I forgot. So yeah, just a couple little finishing things here and there. We can add a little bit of extra drool trails. Let's add a little bit coming off of here. Let's try to get a little bit more loud with that maybe. Oh, that's too loud. Too loud. Back it off. Back it off. So maybe some drips from the fang here. It's like a strand coming from the side of the mouth. Super gross. Maybe there's like a little bit of drool coming off this guy's mouth here. Oh, gross, dude. Okay, so final blacks. We just got to be very careful about where we're putting these, but it's just in an effort to really make this feel like a complete value spectrum. So I'm just going to look for basically all of the deepest, darkest cracks and crevices, and we're going to just kind of hit them a little bit with black here. And it's like, again, we kind of like saved our biggest weapons, our biggest ammunition for the end, when we really needed to express it in a huge, huge way. Maybe I'm bringing a little bit of, like, I guess we could have added a little more specularity there. That's fine. So here you can kind of see it's a very subtle, but like it's just that extra little bit of a value range that helps it feel a whole more complete. Bring in a little bit here. A little to that section there. A little to that section there. And let's go just a little bit in here with it. Okay, so that's kind of a complete value range. And then selective sharpening. So this is just using the sharpen brush. So we're going to go over to sharpen. I'm going to go to, let's just see how this behaves, but it might be, oh, that's actually on a weird mode. Let's see. Let's do it to, I think it's luminosity. Is that what we want? I always forget which one it is. I'm on a new computer, so you'll have to excuse the experimentation. Okay, yeah, there we go. So I'm basically just going into some of these areas, and I'm just going to kind of like find where there's a little bit of like granular detail that I want you to feel like it's got a lot of clarity to it. And I'm just going to kind of pump up the sharpness a little bit in those areas. It's sort of like it's like as if the piece is higher resolution than it is. It's like, again, it's a little bit of a hack, but I usually will do it in like these little kind of highlight areas. You'll see it on people who do like those like sort of viral Instagram portraits. You know, like the lips will be like, you know, very like softly rendered, but then the highlight is like this super sharp, almost like vector highlight. And they're basically just playing with this idea of like hyper edge control. And that I'm just kind of like using that a little bit. So, you know, like here, it's like, I want this this kind of damage and detail to feel like it's really kind of detailed. So I'm just going to add a little bit of extra sharpness there, and it feels more detailed than the stuff that's a little bit softer around it. It may be hard even for you guys to see it sort of like on stream because it's a very subtle detail, but I'll see if we can maybe show like kind of more examples of it later. And before I finalize the piece, I always like to see what would Photoshop do if we told it to auto tone the piece. So I just usually merge copy and I just run an auto tone and I just see, okay, how far off of like what it thinks is photographic values am I? And we can see that not far off, and illustrated pieces, you know, most of the time will change to some degree if you were to try to run auto tone on them. So never look at this as the correct solution to your image. It's more just giving you an alternate way to view it. It also changes colors, right? So it's something you can kind of do with the auto tone is you can set its blending mode to luminosity and see, okay, what if it just affected the values of the piece? Or set it to color. What if it just affected the colors of the piece, right? It's sort of interesting to see what it would do. A lot of times what I end up doing is I set it to luminosity. I lower the opacity to very low. I just crank it just ever so slightly up so you can see it just boosting it really ever so slightly. And then I add a vibrance slider. I pull the vibrance up slightly because as we push the values closer to white and black, we lose saturation. So vibrance brings the saturation back. The auto tone is losing because again, we set auto tone to luminosity, right? It's only affecting values. Those are just some of those like really weird, subtle like mastering techniques to dialing the image in. And as a final thing, you can kind of do like a little unsharp on the whole image if you want. I'm not going to because I'm very carefully controlling it, but as a quick image, sometimes unsharp mask can be just a nice thing to do on a very subtle level. Just be careful with it. So let's go ahead and sign the piece. I think we're at a stage where I'm feeling pretty solid about this. So let's go ahead and put our signature here. $25. All right, so we've got Ghash from the Real Ghostbusters cartoon, the episode Slimer Come Home. It took us 4 episodes to get this done, but I think that was a reasonable amount of time. I do enjoy how it came out, and I hope you enjoyed watching it come together. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for hanging out with me. Good luck with all of your stuff. And remember, I've got a free drawing guide as well that you can get by subscribing to the channel. So I really appreciate all your support for, subscribing and liking and leave a comment. And we'll keep doing these. And we'll have to decide on another villain for next time. It'll be a surprise. So I'll see you then. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.